Geologist Fifield of Project Prometheus met an unfortunate fate as part of the mission's survey team. He was horribly burned by the acid blood of the hammerpeat creature and doused in the mysterious pathogen used by the engineers. He was thought to be dead only to return in a hideous mutated state. This abomination of what was once human wreaked havoc within the garage of the ship, killing anyone in its path with great strength, seemingly unstoppable and invulnerable to gunfire. Finally, it was killed after being engulfed in flames by Captain Yannick. This was one of the standout, shocking moments of the film, but originally it was conceived with a different version of the Fifield Monster in mind. The version we see in the final film is actor Sean Harris in elaborate makeup, achieved through his performance and stunt work, but the initial plan was to present this scene with a fully CGI creation. It was not at all like the design we actually see, and it all began with the collaboration of H.R. Giger. When Giger presented some design concepts in the preliminary stages of Prometheus, one Ridley Scott became especially enamored with was a small, goblin-looking creature. Scott affectionately referred to this design as the baby head, and knew he wanted to incorporate it into the film in some way. As the pre-production stages progressed, this creature grew larger, and it was decided that it could be used for the scene in which Fifield appears mutated by the ominous black goo. But how exactly would this baby head design look when combined with Fifield? Aside from the design by Giger, the description from the screenwriters was a good starting point for the concept artists to work on. Prometheus is the result of two screenplays, one by John Spates and a revised version by Damon Lindelof. Here is the description from Spates. The label stenciled on the spacesuit reads Fifield, but the face is of no human shape. A hideous hybrid of the crewman and a hard-shelled alien, pale and horrific. Its helmet has been shattered by the growth of its elongated skull. Spines have burst through the suit from within, down the crewman's spine, clawed fingers piercing his gloves. Shepard and Vickers scream. Shepard's rifle comes up, but Fifield leaps with inhuman agility upward into the darkness. And this is the description from Lindelof. Dom is standing over this unrecognizable, deformed, and seemingly mutated Fifield. The elongated head tilts back and Fifield looks up at a frightened Dom. This monstrous mutant, the baby head, snarls and shows a large set of piranha-like teeth. Its feet are like that of a velociraptor's, and its hands are large and thick like a bear's. Its face is no longer human and is transformed into something terrifying. This is what the engineers' planned next stage of evolution of our species will be. It is still wearing the suit with the name tag Fifield on it. The baby head stands up, and it is evident that the arms and legs have mutated and grown in length. The arms, even when standing up, still touch the ground. And standing tall, towering over Dom, the baby head is 8 foot tall. The journey of this small, Giger-designed goblin into this 8 foot tall human-alien hybrid was a long and complicated one. The design ended up being one of the biggest challenges of Prometheus's entire production. Richard Stammers, the visual effects supervisor, describes the process. Fifield's transition into something slightly more alien had the most design work in terms of creature work. We had a huge amount of concepts from people all over the world doing work on that. The evolution of Fifield was explored through these different concepts and models that sought out to discover how exactly could and should this be executed on screen. How human should it look, and how alien should it look? Exactly how much should the skull protrude, and in what ways? Will this new form retain Fifield's hair and his tattoos? Does the creature's skin look translucent, or is it thicker and rougher? Should this transformation from human form to the monstrous form actually be shown? If it does lean more into an alien design, then just exactly how much should it resemble the classic familiar xenomorph creature from the original Alien film? One concept Scott seemed to be keen on was the retractable jaws, more human-like but instantly reminiscent of the alien. Weta Digital was recruited to accomplish the final effects once the design was at least as close as it seemed it was going to be appearing in the film. Movement tests were created to define the inhuman abilities of the creature, its speed, its leaping and snarling, and how it would generally react convincingly within the environment of that scene. But even up to that point, Stammers admits the visual effects team was not entirely sure of the design they would eventually be landing on. The scene was filmed with digital effects insertion in mind. That being the case, and not unusual for visual effects heavy productions, a practical element was included for reference. This was Sean Harris in his Fifield Monster makeup. Essentially, 2 different versions ended up being completed, one practical with Harris and another with Weta's babyhead visual effects. Upon scrutinizing this footage, Ridley Scott deemed the practical effects version more appropriate, according to Scott. The digital enhancement is excellent, but it looks like a monster, whereas the actor still looks like the actor, and what he does is pretty damned good. So both are done, but I'm able to look at them both and say, okay, which is the most effective? Funny if the actor is winning. The decision was made, Sean Harris in the practical effects won, and that's the version we ultimately saw. Weta's efforts weren't entirely in vain, though. Their version of the scene was made available to view on the Blu-ray features upon Prometheus' home video release. Additionally, the scene has made its way to YouTube over several uploads, and millions of viewers have had the chance to look at this alternative version and judge for themselves. So, which version is better? Did Ridley Scott make the right call by retaining the practical effects with the actor instead of the digital creation? To be honest, when I look at both versions of the scene isolated, I immediately think it was crazy to discard the Weta effects. The design is really well done, and the effects are convincing. Just generally, it's a cool creature. But this is a gut reaction, and it doesn't quite take into account the full picture. I think it's important to consider how this scene plays out within the context of the full movie, and how it best serves it and fits in altogether. If the idea is to give us something somewhat similar to the Xenomorph, but noticeably different, then it just about completely steals the thunder from the appearance of the Deacon creature in the final moments of the film. Not that they look the same, but the idea is the same. So when we see something that is still monstrous, but definitely not reminiscent of the Xenomorph, I think it still leaves the room to build up to that final surprise, where it's quite clear we're meant to recognize the connection. It would feel almost repetitive at that point to have both the baby head and the Deacon show up in the movie. Within the reality of the movie itself, I don't quite buy into the description in Lindelof's script that it's supposed to be the next evolution in our species. My perception of the black goo, at least when it relates to human and humanoid creatures, is that it is unstable and unpredictable in its effects. Whether the exposure is internal as with Holloway or external as with Fifield, the mutation is chaotic and destructive. Had neither of them been killed, I think the end result would have been the same for each of them, a complete breakdown, like what we see with the engineer in the opening scene. Some kind of biological filter seems to be required in order to refine its uses and produce something new. And we do see that with Shaw's impregnation and the appearance of the trilobite, which refines further through the impregnation of the engineer and the birth of the Deacon. Admittedly, this mysterious substance may not have the strictest set of rules, but the makeup version of Fifield suggests a human body in chaotic mutation rather than in an intended transition. That feels more appropriate to me based on all else that we've seen. Even with all that in mind, I think it's just an incredibly bold move to include a practical, makeup-based creature design in a big special effects movie in 2012. Something like that seems almost unthinkable then, and probably even more so now. As someone who loves practical effects, and wants to see more of them continue to appear in movies, I feel a lot of admiration for this effect. I truly believe that digital and practical can live together on screen in harmony, and as it turned out, Prometheus would be a shining example of this belief. I think Scott made the right decision, and I'm quite satisfied with its inclusion in the movie over the CGI creation. Another thing to consider is how Scott had this great design to work with, and looking at the process from its inception to its appearance in the final effects, it does actually feel as if it was forced to work into something where it just didn't quite fit. Hindsight is 20/20, and it seems fairly clear that Scott was able to use this design for the follow-up in Alien Covenant for the Neomorph. I think it just fits better there, and feels like a more natural inclusion of a compelling creature design. So the baby head may have been discarded from a 2-minute scene from one movie, but it was able to be salvaged and used to what I believe to be a much greater effect in another movie. The Neomorph is one of the highlights of Alien Covenant to me. It's a great creature design, very frightening, and we get to see much more of it and its growth throughout than we ever would have been able to with the baby head in Prometheus. As always though, I'm very curious to hear what you think. Whether you liked or disliked the movie, which version do you think is better? And if you have kind of a middle-of-the-road opinion on Prometheus and liked certain things but felt it needed improvements, would the inclusion of the CGI version of Fifield have been one of those improvements? Comment below and share your thoughts. If you've been following this channel long enough, I'm sure it's not a secret that I love Prometheus. It's an endlessly fascinating movie to me, and it's always worth exploring in videos like this and elsewhere. Which is why it was a great treat for me to be able to make a guest appearance on the Perfect Organism podcast for their special episode titled Defending Prometheus. We had a great chat, it was very productive, and I think maybe, just maybe, my enthusiasm for Prometheus rubbed off on some folks a little bit. If you're interested in checking that out, I'll leave a link in the description below. And as always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave it a like, and be sure to subscribe to keep up with the latest Alien Theory videos. My very special thanks goes out to Brandon James, XenoShadowMorph, and XenoZip, Queen Tiers of the Patreon Hive. Thank you to Gregory Ford and John Griggs, the Hive's Praetorians. A very, very special thanks to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. And a big thanks goes out to Nicholas Butta and Frank, the Alien Theory WEYLAND-YUTANI executives. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. In the meantime, you can follow me on social media, follow @alien_theory on TikTok for some fun video extras, and follow @AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.